June 22nd, you have Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter just came out. Can't wait to go see it. I don't, I don't really know Louisville that well. I'm sure there's some movie theaters around here. But in the spirit of that movie coming out, I want to talk about a rebel in Owen County. Okay, so to talk a little bit about the Civil War and the aftermath. So you had the Civil War going on. 11 southern states declared their secession from the United States. The 11 southern slave states, which they called the Confederacy. And then you had 25 states who supported the federal government. Then the Reconstruction era afterwards, up till 1865 to 1877, it considers Lincoln's dream a failure. The occupation of the South ended in 1877, and the peonage caste system of slavery was still in effect. Plus, there's the Black Codes, and then there's the Mississippi Plan, which justified or not justified, but it showed that violence against people stopped them from voting, so therefore violence and intimidation, you could control the ballot box through fear. And then the South was able to put a lot of Confederates into office. Same is true with Kentucky. It's been said that Kentucky seceded after the Civil War because Kentucky was Union and the government voted for the Union. More Kentuckians voted for the Union during the Civil War, but since it was a border state, they had thought that they were allowed to keep their slaves since they were loyal to the Union. But after the war had ended and the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment was passed, that made slavery illegal all across the country. And Kentucky protested the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. They didn't pass the Civil War amendments until 100 years later. So even though it was considered federal law and everybody knew that slavery had ended, Kentucky was still rebelling even after 1865, after the Appomattox courthouse and after Lincoln's assassination. So I got a story on May 10th, 1861. So the exact time when the Civil War had started is April 12th, 1861. That was the assault at Fort Sumter. So March 4th, 1861 is when 7 cotton states declared their secession and they joined the Confederate States of America. And both President Buchanan and Lincoln rejected the legality of secession. They considered it treason and rebellion. So the states were traitors, like Benedict Arnold and anybody else that's a traitor. So hostilities began on April 12, 1861, when the Confederate forces attacked the U.S. military installation at Fort Sumter in South Carolina. So South Carolina was the first state to secede over slavery, and then it was the first state to attack the federal forces. So Lincoln responded by calling for a volunteer army from each state to recapture the federal property, and that led to the declarations of secession by 4 more slave states. So both sides raised armies as the Union seized control of the border state. So big points on that. The Confederates attacked first. They started the war. The Battle of Fort Sumter. Let's see. U.S. Major Robert Anderson was a Kentuckian. So he defended Fort Sumter. He had held the fort and was fighting the South Carolina militia. And the South Carolina militia had seized all federal property in the Charleston area except for Fort Sumter. So U.S. Major Robert Anderson was a Kentuckian, so Kentucky was very much for the Union. The slave issues they didn't like, because the way that the war had said it was about the Union, it wasn't about slavery. But then Lincoln changed the war's aims to slavery, which is a good aim, but it was a military tactic. It was a military strategy to utilize all the slaves in the southern region who were able-bodied people who could take up arms against their oppressors. So So that's the Confederates attacked Fort Sumter first, and when it came to Kentucky, the Confederates broke Kentucky's neutrality first. Polk, General Polk of the Confederacy, I believe it was General Polk of the Confederacy, invaded Kentucky. So Kentucky was very much it's brother versus brother. So there's it's just that when you see all the Confederate flags all around, there's actually only one monument, one Union monument in Kentucky, and it's in Lewis County, so it's in northern Kentucky. And then they said that fighting for the Union was always right and everlasting right, and fighting for the Confederacy was wrong and everlasting wrong, something like that. But that's the only monument here. Even in U of L, you got the tallest Confederate monument here, I think. I mean, I guess Jefferson Davis Memorial, if you want to consider that a Confederate monument. But Jefferson Davis statues are in the Capitol building and all over the place. And somebody once made the argument that even if it's a bad history, you still want to it's history, so you want to maintain it. And I don't know, I disagree when you come up to making monuments. You don't want to make monuments out of the horrible, destructive, evil people. We don't want Hitler monuments all over the place. We don't want the slaughter of the Indians or anything that justifies slavery. I don't think that's anything you would want to make a monument out of. So we need more pro-Union, pro-United States monuments, since the Union represented the United States and the Confederates represented the Al-Qaeda terrorists, the rebellion against the Union. In Owen County, May 10th, 1861, Frankfort had this message. They had this information to give out. Messengers arrived here this morning, said that 300 or 400 black folks had armed themselves and they formed a company and they're committing depredations. This is a reported Negro insurrection in Owen County, and that the whites undertook to disarm them and they had several men killed. The governor has sent General Buckner to ascertain the truth of the matter, and General Buckner had not returned. General Buckner, Bolivian Buckner, Simon Bolivar Buckner, he was a Confederate and eventually become governor. So Kentucky's got Confederate governors after the Civil War. But like I said, there's countercurrents. As many Confederate flags as we have, we also have Muhammad Ali supporters. So there's countercurrents. There's a strong white supremacist culture, but then there's also a strong anti-white supremacist culture. So there's a lot of countercurrents. So in Owen County, there's 300 or 400 black folks who had armed themselves, and they formed a company and they're ready to fight. This is May 10th, so this is 1 month after Fort Sumter. 1 month after Fort Sumter, the black folks in Owen County were ready to, let's do this. We got a war going on. Let's do this. The telegraph operator in Patriot, Indiana, telegraphed that he had been called on to aid in quelling a Negro insurrection which broke out last night in Owen and Gallatin counties in Kentucky. Great fears were felt, as it was supposed that the black folks were led on by 2 or 3 white citizens of Kentucky. The people are gathering their forces to put down the rebellion, and runners had been sent to Indiana for assistance. Captain Wells of this place, who has a company ready for our own state service, has telegraphed that he would send his men at arms to their assistance if needed. The telegraph line has been down all morning between Patriot and Vevey, Indiana, so we are without any news from the latter place. It is thought that the line has been cut by the insurgents to prevent the transmission of the news of the insurrection. Both of those were printed in the New York Times, May 11th, 1861. The next day, in the New York Times, the reported Negro insurrection in Owen and Gallatin County originated as follows. One lady met 2 black folks and armed. Hold on, I got somebody at the door, so I guess I gotta go check it out.